Ladies and gentlemen, welcomes for disease classifications and coding, the indexings of medical records. This unit is strictly to introduce you into the groupings of diseases basing on the available approaches, what we call axis. The coding, what it means by coding in the classification of diseases, and also indexings of the medical records, and the importance of carrying out disease classifications and some of the categories of the classification of diseases that is available. Yeah, and we all know that the medical records carries bulky information, and as a result of the bulky informations, challenges at times arises to the extent that identifications and retrieval of certain informations becomes challenging for the medical record officers, not only medical record officers, but every practitioner within the healthcare services. Now, the only solution for this problem to be solved is to have a structured system. And the structured systems would mean that there is a system that allow easy identifications and retrieval of any information that is necessary at any time. Since the medical records carries bulk informations, if the information is collected and stored and then it cannot be retrieved, it definitely gives no meanings to the research department, to the research industry. So that will really affect the service delivery. It will affect the healthcare systems in many ways. So the medical records needed to be classified because there is need to being in access to some of those informations in the right time. There is need for the easy access and availability of those information in the right time. So how do we define a classification of diseases? So we in a simple term, we define classification of as a system for categorizing morbid entities and according to some of the established criteria, or grouping knowledge into homogeneous groups, each groups having similar characteristics. So when you talk about homogeneous, means that elements of the same characters. So for example, if we have, we can decide to say, okay, we are going to be grouping our diseases according to the system of the systems of which that particular disease do what affect. Now, if we have the disease of the lung, we have disease of the lung, we put them together. If we have disease of a respiratory system, we put them together. If we have disease of circulatory systems, we put them together. So putting them together according to the system that they affect, it's what we are referring to criteria, established criteria. And then under each system, you may realize that each system, for example, the lung system, you find that there are very many diseases that may affect the lung. They have similar behaviors, similar characteristics. So these categories are actually also grouped where they are also grouped together. So this is what we are referring to homogeneous groups. Okay, and then most importantly, we also looked at the history of disease classifications. The history of disease classifications help you to understand when was the attempt made, or the first attempts, and the purpose of those attempts, and how did disease classification come into existence, who made the trials, where, and who succeeded. So this is very important for you to also understand, so that you can be able to reply to your questions efficiently. Yeah, so we are saying that disease classification has been around for quite some time, and then there's a gentleman called Francisco. Francisco is a person who made the first attempt in 1706 to 1777, and that attempt was actually on the systematic classifications. He was trying to discover if at all there is a systems that of which the medical records can be classified in order to ease the classification of disease. So the backgrounds may be noisy, but let me hope that I am clear enough. Try to focus on the informations, not on the background. Definitely there may be noises that is reflecting and affecting some of our communications, but I believe I'm trying to be loud enough. Now, in this attempt, the statistical study also began on all the practical purposes, and the person who started this statistical study was a gentleman called John Grant on the London Bill of Mortality in the early of 18th century. So John Grant undertook his works in an attempt to discover how many live-born babies died before the age of 6 years. So his concern was trying to look at the number of babies that dies between or below, basically below 6 years, below 6 years of age. You get the point? So, and that was basically made in the 18th centuries. Now, what is your concern? What concerns you here? It is, you need to understand who made the first attempt on statistical studies. 2, what is the purpose of John Grant, the London Bill studies in a classification? What was he trying to discover? And then another things would be, who actually tried to discover the mortality or the classification of mortality and morbidity of the children below the age of 6 years. So these things can definitely be classified, and sorry for the cut. So the concerns of John Grant was trying to look at how many patients, how many newborns or children that dies before they clock 6 years. I think there were many attempts that was made to distinguish the contributions of these standards, and some of the attempts was also made by the gentleman called William Cullen. Okay, and then the next attempt was also being implemented by Jacques Bertillon, who was requested by the International Statistical Institute in 1891, to prepare the classifications of causes of death, preparing the classifications of underlying causes of death. Now, when you talk about the causes of death, for instance, now, if we have a patient who is suffering from HIV/AIDS, okay, we have a patient who is suffering from HIV/AIDS, and then this patient, he or she may be on treatment, he or she might not be on treatment. And of course, if the treatment is not initiated early enough, or maybe has not been taken as prescribed, what do we get? It means that it leads to what we call viral progressions. So when the virus progresses, it results into CD4 cells suppressions. So when the CD4 cells or the immunity becomes weak, the results would be that some of the complications, like tuberculosis, would start attacking the person. Now, at the end of the day, cancer will actually attack the person and find the immunity of the person is very weak. And as a result of that, the person will die of cancer. You get the point? A person will die of cancer. But what causes cancer? It is because of the occurrence of the HIV that suppress the immunity as a result of the increased viral loads, and then resulting into making immunity weak, and then in making the body to be infected by cancer, and then eventually cancer leading to what? Leading to death. So this is extremely what may lead to the death of a person. Now, cancer in this case becomes the underlying cause of death, not HIV. Even if we knew that this patient was actually infected or was positive, but the process leads to to cancer infections, and the person died as a result of cancer. So definitely, that means the person had like 3 conditions. Now, it means the HIV will have to be given a diagnosis course, and also TB will have to be given a diagnosis course. But this will be as provisional or additional conditions. But then the main aspect of the cause of death would be cancer. Why cancer? Because cancer is what eventually leads to the death of the patient, not the TB, not the HIV. So it would mean that we are going to focus on cancer as our main diagnosis, and then we quote that one as the main diagnosis or what has causes death. So the purpose of this study was strictly to emphasize on such. And according to our statistics, this is what we are now, we decided to, this is a classification that we are now using into our system. Now, when you look at this, you realize that the only thing that may concern you here is that today's statistical classification of data that is being used was discovered by who and which year. Do you get the point? So you need to focus on that. And then we're saying that International Classification of Disease, this is ICD. International Classification of Disease, you take note of this. It's the classification of diseases, invoices, causes of, and causes of what? And causes of death. And the responsibilities or the activities of the disease classification is basically promoted by World Health Organizations. So the World Health Organization needs the data which are classified, the medical data classifications, for purposes like comparing the health profiles of different countries. For example, if there is a disease, the same disease in Uganda and the same disease is in Kenya, the World Health Organization looks at how Kenya is managing the same disease and how Uganda is managing the same disease in order to improve on the weaknesses on other districts. So comparisons of the health statistics within the regions and also internationally. And even the Minister of Health uses the classified data to really compare data among districts and regions to understand which district is performing well and why are they performing well. Those ones who are performing weak, why are they performing weak? Okay, so there is the medical data classifications here, and what we have there is the purposes of the medical data classifications. Okay, so the purposes of medical data classifications, I believe that you can handle that by yourself. You can handle that by yourself. I don't think there is anything that is too difficult for you to understand right there. So now there's a revision question: is how do you understand the term medical data? Yeah, you can add some of the questions like what is ICD? What is International Classification of Disease? You can add questions. Another question can be what is the classifications of diseases? And then another question would be explain briefly the history or the background of disease classifications. Okay, so what I want to explain here is the medical data classifications. So it is obvious that the major responsibility of disease classification, of the medical record department is the classification of diseases. And as a result, the approaches that can be used in the classification of diseases refer to what we are calling axes. Refers to what we are calling axes. So in the case of axes, we have various approaches that we can basically use. One of them is what we are calling anatomical. Anatomical is quietly concerned with the body structures, the body and its structures. Now, how do we approach the classification of diseases under anatomical? You will do me a favor because I already started with the anatomical, yet I was supposed to start with the alphabetical. Let me now proceed with the anatomical, then I come back to alphabetical. So anatomical classifications is achieved or is done in two ways. Number one, we can classify the diseases according to the part of the body which is affected by what? By the disease. Now, for instance, if we have diseases that affect the head only, heads only, we put them together. There may be varieties of them. If we have diseases that affect the eye only, we again put that together. It doesn't matter how many they are. If we have diseases that infect only the legs, we also put that one together. Doesn't matter how many you are. And then another classification is what we are calling classification according to the body system. So this is what I've tried explaining somewhere a few minutes ago, that when we are classifying diseases based on the system, we look at the system and the diseases that affect only that system. So for example, when we are talking about circulatory systems, we look at the diseases that affect only circulatory system. Now the problem with this classification approach is that some of the diseases may be affecting or can affect more than one system. You find that the same disease can actually affect circulatory system. The same disease can affect digestive system. The same disease can affect respiratory system. Now there becomes a problem, because each system must be carrying each specifications. So the challenge of that approach will be in situations where one disease is affecting various parts of the body. One disease is affecting different systems. Now going back to number one, alphabetical axis. So alphabetical axis is the classifications of diseases basing or according to the names of the disease. So those diseases that start with letter A, we put them together. Those ones that we start with letter B, we put them together. Those ones that start with letter C, we put them together like that. So we arrange them just like words in the dictionary. I think that is very simple to really understand. The next things we have is what we are calling etiological. Etiological explains the origins or the causal factors of disease. The question is, what has causes a disease in a certain groups of people? And which means the classification of this disease will base on those diseases, get me clear, will base on those diseases that has a clear or well-defined causal agents. So there must be a disease that we know what causes it, because we have some of the diseases like what we call FU or FFU or fever of unknown origin. Now some of the fever of unknown origin, those are the kind of fever that happens especially in children, and we may not be able to know what has causes it. There are some of the diseases like hemorrhoid. Hemorrhoid basically it is we don't understand whether it's caused by bacteria, whether it's caused by fungi, and some of these conditions which of unknown diseases that actually easily managed by antibiotics. So that is about etiological axis. Of course, you are going to get a challenge in situations where you have a disease that you don't know the origin, and yet you are supposed to classify those ones that you understand the well-defined causes. So the next we have epidemiological axis. This is the approach of classifying diseases or grouping diseases according to the conditions and infectious disease, whether if it is infectious diseases or it is an accident. The social factors. The social factors includes what has the person done, what have you done to lead that has led to the cause of such disease, and what is the person not doing. Now we may not actually be focusing on the person. We may be looking at the perspectives of, for example, like the public health. What has the public failed to commit themselves to that resulted into the occurrence or the incidence of what? The incidence of disease. So that would be concerns of epidemiology or epidemiological axis. And then we have morphological axis. Morphological axis, we are saying this is a kind of morbid change produced by the disease or inflows and non-useful statistics. Now, what under morphological is the classification we base on the change that a disease has caused to a person. For instance, if a person has been infected by let's say leprosy, as a person has been infected with the leprosy. Now, as a result of leprosy, a person lost his or her what? Hand or hands. Now, we are going to classify these diseases according to the loss of these hands. You get, as this person lost the legs, as a person lost the eyes, as a person lost the hands. So we are going to base on that. And we are saying it is not actually scientific to be used for statistical purposes. And then finally we have functional axis. Now the functional axis is concerned with the kind of the disturbance or dysfunction produced by the disease injury. Now, what does it mean? What we're saying is that we look at what as that disease causes to a person in terms of functionality. As a disease causes a person to be disabled, or as it causes any part of the body to dysfunctions. So dysfunctions would mean that is not actually functioning. So someone might have lost their mindset and they are not thinking right. Someone might have lost a certain part of their body, and as a result they are actually having the defect. So all these can actually be the apples that can be used. This subheading also, this particular part right here is actually repeated. It's actually repeated, please. You ignore that.